Right. So let's talk about a story that is somehow both incredibly important and mind-numbingly complicated. The kind of story that makes you want to lie down and think about puppies, but you can't, because the future of American capitalism is at stake. Fun! A federal appeals court just dropped a bombshell ruling that basically told a former president, you can't do that. Specifically, it reinstated Rebecca Kelly Slaughter to her position as a commissioner at the Federal Trade Commission, or FTC. This is a big deal, not just for her, but for the very structure of our government. It's like finding out the referee you threw out of the game has just been handed the whistle again, and now he's staring right at you. You see, President Trump, in a move that surprised absolutely no one familiar with his management style, had removed Slaughter from her post. His administration argued that the president should have the authority to fire anyone in the executive branch for any reason. It's the ultimate you're fired political fantasy. However, the court disagreed, pointing to nearly a century of legal precedent designed to stop one person from having that much unchecked power. This decision wasn't just a personal victory for Slaughter, it was a powerful statement about the independence of federal agencies. It's a check on presidential power that has massive implications for how our government is supposed to function, beyond just one person and one agency. The ruling effectively rewound the clock, placing a key figure back into an agency at the heart of major battles over antitrust and consumer protection. Think of the FTC as the government's hall monitor for big business. They're the ones who are supposed to step in when a giant tech company decides to buy up all its competitors, or when a business decides its privacy policy should be written in ancient Aramaic and printed on a single grain of rice. Having Slaughter back on the commission doesn't just add one more person to the room. It fundamentally changes the agency's political and ideological balance, which we will absolutely get to. This is the governmental equivalent of a dramatic soap opera reveal, and it's happening right now. So what we have here is a classic high-stakes political drama. On one side you have the argument for a powerful, decisive executive who can staff the government with people loyal to their agenda. On the other, you have the principle that certain agencies need to be shielded from political whims to do their jobs properly and without fear of retribution. This court case has forced that fundamental tension out into the open. The judges basically had to decide, does the president get to be the CEO of America Inc. with total hiring and firing power, or is he more of a manager who has to follow a very specific, very old, and very important set of HR rules? The court's answer for now is a firm vote for the HR rules. To understand why this is all so complicated, we need a quick, and I promise, only mildly painful history lesson. Let's talk about the Federal Trade Commission. The FTC was created back in 1914 to prevent unfair methods of competition. Essentially, it's there to make sure the corporate world doesn't turn into a real-life game of Monopoly, where one player ends up owning everything, and everyone else just cries. It's an independent agency, a key phrase. That independent part is supposed to mean something. It's designed to be a quasi-judicial body. Part investigator, part rulemaker, part judge. Commissioners serve fixed 7-year terms. Crucially, they aren't supposed to be fired just because the president is having a bad day. This brings us to the legal bedrock of the whole affair. Humphrey's Executor v. United States, 1935. Sounds like a Victorian novel, but it's one of the most important cases on presidential power. Back then, FDR fired an FTC commissioner, William Humphrey, because Humphrey's conservative views clashed with the New Deal. Humphrey died shortly after, and his executor sued for lost salary. The Supreme Court sided with Humphrey, unanimously. They ruled the president could not remove a commissioner of a quasi-judicial agency just for political disagreement. The court said Congress created the FTC as an independent body of experts insulated from the White House's political pressure cooker. If a president could fire commissioners at will, that independence would be a sham. The agency would become a political tool, with long-term fact-based investigations derailed by short-term political goals. The justices said presidents can only fire these officials for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. That's a very high bar. You can't fire someone because you dislike their ideas. You have to prove they're truly failing at the job. For nearly a century, that precedent has been the wall protecting agencies like the FTC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and many others. It establishes that the president's power isn't absolute. Some officials have for-cause protections, a level of job security most cabinet secretaries don't have. Trump's team argued the precedent was outdated, but the appeals court revisited Humphrey's Executor and basically said, no, still good law. And that's why a 90-year-old case is front-page news again. Now let's walk through the timeline of this legal saga, which has had more twists than a pretzel factory. It all began back when President Trump decided that Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, a Democratic commissioner whose term wasn't even close to being over, had to go. The White House announced her removal, citing a need for agency heads to be fully aligned with the president's executive agenda. Immediately, this set off alarm bells in the legal community. It was a direct, unambiguous challenge to the Humphrey's executor precedent that we just discussed. Slaughter, instead of just packing up her office, decided to fight back, and so the lawsuit was filed. The first stop on this legal journey was the district court. There, the judge actually sided with the Trump administration. The district court's ruling was a pretty big shock. It argued that the president's constitutional authority to oversee the executive branch was paramount. The judge essentially said that the power to appoint officials implies the power to remove them, and that any congressional limits on that removal power were likely unconstitutional. For a moment, it seemed like nearly 100 years of established government structure was about to be upended. Slaughter was out, the administration had won round one, the future of independent agencies looked very, very wobbly. But of course, that wasn't the end of the story. Slaughter and her legal team immediately appealed the decision. They sent the case up to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, and that's where the tables turned dramatically. After hearing arguments from both sides, the appeals court issued its ruling in late August 2025. It was a decisive reversal. The court, in a 2-1 decision, found that the district court had erred. It ruled that Humphrey's executor was still the law of the land. The firing was declared unlawful. The appeals court ordered that Rebecca Kelly Slaughter be immediately reinstated to her position as an FTC commissioner. The decision was a stunning legal rebuke to the argument for expansive presidential power. It didn't just give Slaughter her job back, it forcefully reaffirmed the legal principle that independent agencies are meant to be independent. The roller coaster had reached the top of the hill and come screaming down the other side, ending right back where it started. Slaughter is back at the FTC, ready to get back to work. And that is where things get really interesting for the agency today. So, what does this actually mean for the FTC right now on this fine day of September 3rd, 2025? Well, it means everything. Before this ruling, the FTC was operating with a 2-1 Republican majority. This meant the agency's chair could generally rely on a party-line vote to advance their agenda, which included decisions on which mergers to challenge, which consumer protection rules to write, which companies to investigate. With a solid majority, the party in power could steer the ship in whatever direction it wanted, whether that meant more aggressive antitrust enforcement or a more hands-off business-friendly approach. The agency was, for all intents and purposes, under single-party control. Slaughter's reinstatement completely blows up that dynamic. With her return, the commission is now deadlocked at 2-2 between Democrats and Republicans. A deadlocked commission is a very different beast. It means no action can be taken, no major investigation launched, and no lawsuit filed without at least one commissioner crossing the aisle. The era of one party unilaterally calling the shots is over. The FTC chair can no longer simply push their agenda through. They now have to negotiate, compromise, and persuade a member of the opposing party to come along. This will profoundly impact the FTC's work in antitrust. Major tech mergers, controversial pharmaceutical deals, and other massive corporate consolidations will now face a different calculus. A decision to sue to block a merger will require bipartisan support. This could lead to a more moderate, cautious approach, or it could lead to gridlock, leaving the agency largely on the sidelines.